This is yet another installment of Armageddon Behind the Scenes, and one of the things I wanted to talk about today is how we go about choosing staff and how that process has sort of evolved. What we look for in staff, and perhaps advice to the new staff members that are coming on soon. When I first started playing, the way that you got to be staff was someone noticed you and asked you to be on staff. Ways that you could be noticed, pretty much just solid play. We didn't have a lot of soliciting ideas for items or descriptions. It really kind of was, in some ways, I think it was a kind of who you knew in popularity contest to a certain extent. When I came on staff, one of the things that we started looking for was not just writing ability. I started looking for people that I thought would be compatible with the team. And the process kind of evolved. I mean, for a while, it was just that I would notice someone, either they would write in a lot, or my character would interact with them. I would interact with them, staff to player. And, you get a sense of, you get a good sense of people from the way that they play often. You get a good sense of people's personality. And I will say, I mean, one of the things that I think is important is somebody can be the world's most fabulous emoter and description writer and still kind of be a jackass. And it's, let's keep the jackasses off staff if you can, because those are the people, I think, who end up leading to a bad reputation for the MUD. And it's those people, I think, who end up, we've had people in the past who cheated for other players or have, made items for their characters. And generally, we try and boot people off staff pretty fast if we notice abuses like that going on. It's gotten to the point now where currently what happens is we ask people to write in a set of answers to a set of questions that we've come up with, and then from the people that apply, we look at those applications, we look at their past account notes, we post on the internal staff board what the names are, what the accounts are, and we ask for feedback. And you get a lot of good feedback from people who've worked, say, with a person as a player in their clan. I mean, they've got a really good sense of whether or not the person is, going to be easy to work with or not. And I'm not saying that easy to work with is the sole criteria, but it's a very important criteria. Game knowledge is another important criteria. And you got to have some writing skills, although we have taken on some of the world's worst spellers on occasion. Hi, Tlalok. But they have had other wonderful qualities that always outweighed that. And, you can always bring in spell check if you need to. So we interview people. The questions, usually we have 3 people who conduct the interview, and we alternate asking questions. It's usually the 3 overlords, and sometimes we'll swap in a high lord, and just to kind of give people a chance. And usually the rest of the staff is there. We hold it on the test port, and everybody's in the same room, and a lot of other staff are there and providing copious commentary on the M channel, but we ask them to be quiet and invisible so they don't get too distracting and frightening for people. I think it was Nathan who came up with this particular technique, and one of the things that had happened was we would take people on staff, and they would, they'd go, oh yes, I've always wanted to be on staff, and then they would like fade out after 2 weeks when they realized that we actually did a lot of work. So the theory was that if we treated it more professionally, people would realize that it was in fact a big commitment, and that, sorry about that, that it was in fact something that we took seriously, that they needed to take seriously. Because you had a lot of people that got on staff and they were just like, oh, well, we don't get to, stand in the room where people are net sexing and provide commentary. We don't get to go make a bunch of items for our characters. So, and I think that the interview process has ended up with a lot better staff. I mean, one of the things that we can look for in that is how the person is going to get along with the team. There's some standard questions that we ask. One of the things that I use often is, tell me about a time that you failed and how you reacted to that. Because, for one thing, it's very rare that someone comes up with a "I never failed" answer. I can think of that happening once when it seemed somewhat implausible. But it really tells you a lot about a person. You know, what do they do when they fail? Because when you get on staff, you know, you're totally lost. You don't know what to do. We're trying to provide direction, but, you know, it's hard. It takes somebody who has some initiative to really do well. And there's always moments you fail. And I will tell you actually the story of my failure, and I tell this to new staff members because there is no way they can screw up worse than I did, which is that early on when I was an overlord, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks in, I was cleaning up the source directory because whenever someone touched a file, it ended up creating a copy of it. And so there's a lot of old junk in there, and I thought I would be helpful and clear out all these old files. And I didn't understand wildcards as well as I thought I did, and I managed to erase the entire source directory. Now, this wouldn't have been a problem if we had had backups, but unfortunately the backup that I think the most recent backup had been a couple of months earlier. Luckily, I had just implemented a coders board and asked people to post changes, and because people had someone who shall remain anonymous get so pissed off at me for insisting on this that they were amazingly thorough in documenting their code changes, and so then when I erased the code, they actually had a pretty good record. Which, at any rate, so I erased the source code. I ended up calling Azram. I was terrified. I was so frantic. I was in tears. I mean, literally in tears on the phone. And I thought, oh, they're going to fire me. And not only that, I thought, oh, crap, you know, what have I done? I've made people lose a huge amount of work. And of course, it wasn't fixable. You know, the REM command is not reversible, unfortunately. It's not like some other systems. So, I mean, nobody is ever going to screw up worse than that. Nobody else is going to basically erase 2 months' worth of other people's work. And I have apologized frequently for that. So I'll go on tape right now, on record right now, to say, boy, I am still very sorry about that, guys. At any rate, nobody's going to screw up that badly. One of the things that I encourage new staff to do, it's not so much that you have to know everything, but you have to know how to find out about things. You have to have a pretty good sense of where stuff is on the staff site. And I will say, you know, the player site, the staff site is about, I would guess, 10 times as large, maybe larger. We've got, right now we've got a staff wiki, we've got all these old docs. There's just a huge amount of information there, and nobody can be expected to know it all. Nobody can be expected to have memorized all the names of the plants and minerals of Xylanthus. But if you know where to go, that's, you know, that's just as good if you know where to look it up. And I think one of the other things that's very good for new staff to remember is to ask questions. I don't think you can ever go wrong asking questions. Now, if you're asking the same question over and over again, or if it is a question that is really pretty easily findable, people may get a little short-tempered after a while. But, you know, if you genuinely can't find the answer, boy, you know, we're glad to help. And a lot of people will actually be able to make the hunt for that knowledge quite a bit shorter. So, the other thing is on staff, I think it's important to remember that no one is irreplaceable. It's a team effort. Even the overlords are not replaceable. We've done a lot of shifting over the years, and it's a very cool team. It's a team of some of the smartest, funniest, most creative people I know, and I don't think in the workforce I've ever worked with a team that's quite as high performance and full of quite so many amazing people. And I just am amazed and delighted every time I see evidence of that. So I'm going to end there, since I see that I have rambled on for almost 10 minutes, and I will say thank you and keep playing.